This is my final class presentation. My name is Zarif Akhtab, and this is for CSE 335. The name of my application is called Fit Meals, and the purpose of this application is to help aspiring fit people make smarter choices in their eating habits. This will help them make those smarter choices by helping them track their meals, help them find healthy restaurants in their area, and help them get directions to those restaurants. So first, I'm going to give you a quick little walkthrough of what my application looks like. There are 4 panels to it, as you can see at the bottom. The first panel is meals, and this is your main home panel. And this will show you all the meals that you have entered in so far. So as you can see, I've had chicken and quesadillas. It'll also say how many calories are in them, and it'll show a picture of it. The second panel is add a meal, and you can add a meal by, you write the name of the meal, do a quick little description, how many calories. And the cool thing is you can add an image from your iPhone, and then when you hit add meal and you come back to the home button, the meals, and you refresh, it'll actually show you that new meal that you added. Next up, we're looking at the 4th tab, which is the search tab. And what this does is it allows users to search for a restaurant in their area. So when it says what do you want to eat, so say you can type in something like healthy, and then in what city you can type Tempe. And when you hit find me food, it'll take you to a UI web view, and it's essentially Yelp. And finally, we have the third tab, which is the directions. And this is actually really cool what I did with the directions. Normally with the UI map view, like what we've done for class, it's all been done through one model view controller, but I actually split it up into 2 different model view controllers. And I'll get a little more, talk a little bit more about it in my class descriptions. But just to give you an idea of how this works, it shows you where you are currently on the map, and then I can type in anything. So let's think something healthy like Panera Bread. See, it already gives me some suggestions. I can go ahead and click on that. It'll show me where Panera Bread is. Once I click on that, it'll give me a brief little description. And if I tap the car, it'll actually open up Apple's native map application, and it'll give you directions to Panera Bread from where you are currently located. All right, so I'm going to quickly run through the class diagrams. I'm going to have to run through it quick because this is 2 pages long. So first of all, I'm going to start with the first view controller. And this class describes that first tab I showed you, which was the list of all the meals that you've entered. And there's nothing really that insane going on here, but the only thing that I can say that stands out is that it has a function that fetches results from core data. And everything else is pretty standard when you use core data and segues, the table view functions right here. But okay, next one is a second view controller, and second view controller describes that one page that lets you add the meals. And once again, this is a very basic class. The only things that stand out here is we have a UI image picker that I use, and also it does access core data, and it saves to core data. From there, we're gonna go to this find restaurant view controller, and what this is the one page where it prompts the user to type in what kind of food they're looking for and where they are currently located. And essentially, what it does is it takes the user input and sends its data through a segue, and it sends it segues to web view controller. And in web view controller, once again, it's nothing that fancy. All it's doing is it's appending whatever the user inputs into the URL, and it opens up a UI web view. And the only thing that's noteworthy about this is that it uses a UI web view override. All right, now this is like the meat and potatoes of the website, or of my application, which is the map view controller. And as I specified before, this is broken down into 2 different view controllers. So this one right here, the map view controller, this handles the actual map. And so some key things that I can point out right off the bat is it does have 3 different extensions, and I chose to model it this way because having it writing my own extensions gives me more control over what's exactly happening. And a few noteworthy functions that I wrote in this is this get directions function. And what get directions does is it takes all the information that the user has inputted and whatever my program has given it. So say where it drops the pin and shows you like where your destination is, it sends all that information to the native Apple map application so the user can get their directions. And I'll just quickly explain what the functionalities of these extensions are. So first of all, we'll start from the bottom up. This first extension right here, this is the local manager. And all these CL location managers, all they do is they handle anything and everything that has to do with your current location. So it handles when the user first clicks on the map for the first time, it'll prompt the user and let them know that my application is using their current location and if the user is okay with it or not. So it'll handle all those prompts. Also, it'll get the user location, and yeah, that's essentially what it does. So then this next extension right here, which is the map view, it handles what we're exactly seeing on the map. So nothing too crazy. And then this extension right here, the drop pin zoom, it handles how the pin gets dropped and where it zooms onto the map, just like the title suggests. And there's really nothing else noteworthy to talk about for this one, so I'm just going to go ahead and go to the second page. So on the second page, we have this class app delegate, which once again, it's a very basic functionality. The only thing I've added to it is some core data code to it, but it's very basic. All right, so this is what we're interested in right here. This class location search table. As I've mentioned before, the map view is broken down into two separate view controllers. So this map view controller handles the map, and then this location search table handles the search bar, and then all the suggestions for it. So this is what I'm talking about right here. The first view controller handles this map, and then the second view controller, which I'm talking about right now, handles this search bar right here. And then as you can see, when I type something in like Panera, or heck, we'll even try Walmart, it'll find all the Walmarts in your area and it'll give you some basic general data about it. So how I modeled this is it's calling all the functions through the extensions, and most of the function calls are done through the did load function, and I'll quickly talk about what each of these extensions do. So right here, the did select row at index path, that's just handling the user taps and whatnot. And right here, this next extension, we have search controller, and this is where it gets a little interesting. So in search controller, we have what it does is it does an MK local search request, and it takes in a search and provides location context. And MK local search, really all it does is it performs an actual search on the request object, and it executes the search query and returns an MK local search response, which will contain an array of map items, which I can of course display as a table cell. Some notable functionalities that I use is I believe it's called natural language query, which it'll take something as simple as a term like Walmart, and it'll already know that you're talking about Walmart Supercenter. It'll get all the information about it. So I was actually thinking about using the Google Map API. However, using the Apple Map API definitely has its benefits, because a lot of these functionalities, like the natural language query, is already built into it, and it supports it very well. And then finally, we have this this oddball right here. This is the class meal, and all this is this is a class representation of the core data model that I have for meal. So as you can see, it just has a couple string values for like the meal title, meal description, meal calories, and then it has a data value for the meal picture. All right, moving on. So next up, we have the MVC architecture right here, and this MVC architecture isn't it's nothing that you haven't seen before, so I'll just briefly explain it real quick. So we have the view. Obviously, the view is what the user sees, so the view handles displaying entered meals, it shows the map, it updates the table cells, it reacts to the user's taps, and it takes in user inputs. So once it takes in the user inputs, it updates it and sends that to the controller. And the controller is essentially like the engine of the application. And the controller, in my case, the controller handles the map APIs, the web API calls, it fetches core data, it saves to core data, and it also handles the user taps and interactions. So once from the view, the user enters in some data, it'll send that data to the controller, be like, hey, here's some data, do something with it. So the controller will do something with it, and it'll send that information back to the view as like, here's your updated information. And then we have model over here, and model is essentially core data. And for model, I only had one model, which was the meal, is what's being saved. And essentially what the model does is it saves new meal datas, and it also the control also notifies it whenever meal information is either added or deleted from the view. All right, so let's talk about some capabilities and limitations of my applications. The biggest things I can think about is first off, when we're looking at this first tab, which shows you all the meals that the user has entered, I personally would have liked it if I could have had it where it sorts everything by week. So it'll find out what the user has been eating all throughout the week, and it'll sort all that. And then when the user's scrolling through it, when they have enough data in here, they can see what they've eaten like 2 weeks prior, 1 week prior, or heck, even like 4 weeks before. However, it may be due to some holes in knowledge I have in core data. I was not able to fully implement this. Um, but I feel that since I had to focus on other things like creating the map, I was not able to give this my full attention. However, if I did this project again, I would definitely be able to get that going. And my second biggest thing on the limitations, I believe, is some error handling that I didn't handle so gracefully. So when you put in your meals, if you forget to add an image and you go ahead and click add meal, the whole entire application will actually crash. Um, but enough with the limitations. Some capabilities, like I said, the map capability, I'm very proud of because it's not something we've done in class. It was extracurricular. So not only can the user search for something, it'll give you search results for everything within your area. It'll give you recommendations. It'll drop it onto the pin exactly where it is, and it'll even give you directions to it. So it's still a pretty comprehensive application. All right, so some lessons learned. One of the key lessons I learned is writing software for consumers is much more tricky than the normal software I write. Most of the software I write is written for more of the technically tech savvy people, so you don't have to focus as much on design and how everything will flow, but rather whether or not it functions and does what it needs to do. But what I found myself doing is instead of thinking as much about functionality, I'm more focused on like how smooth it runs, how user friendly it is, and whether or not the user gets whether or not I give the user the best possible experience that they can get through this application. And another lesson I learned, one software developer in the industry once told me that always assume the worst in people when designing a product, and I never really understood that until I started writing this product. And these last two things kind of go hand in hand. These last two topics, assume the worst in people and extensive testing is the key. So let me give you a quick little story. That whole thing about my app crashing if you don't put in the image, I actually caught that a little earlier, but I didn't focus too much on it because I thought that if you're putting in all this data, you're just gonna put in a picture. Like, of course you're gonna put in a picture, but when I gave it to some friends to test it, they didn't always put in a picture, and it ended up crashing my application. So I assumed kind of the best in people, and I thought that they would take all the proper steps to put in the data. However, that's not always the case. So the biggest takeaway is if you see a possible loophole in breaking your application, don't assume that even if it's a statistical anomaly, there's still a possibility that it could happen. So you should always do error catches, and you should always prepare for the worst. And once again, like I said, extensive testing is the difference between a top chart app and a mediocre app. And had I been testing, have I done better test cases as I was developing the product? I believe such a simple error like that would have not slipped through the cracks. Finally, some suggestions. Overall, this class was I enjoyed it for the most part. However, one thing I would really like is some more demonstrations from the instructor. I know the professor already has some videos about like some basic core data or how to set up a basic segue. However, in class, he goes over a lot more extensive and harder examples. And that's all fine when you're looking at it in class, but when you come home and you actually try to implement a lot of these things, you don't remember everything, and sometimes it's just nice having a good reference. And I know there is YouTube and there's like Google in general. However, Swift recently had a complete overhaul from Swift 2 to Swift 3. So a lot of the tutorials that you see have already been deprecated because we're in Swift 3 right now, and we can't. There's a lot of syntax differences between the two. So some more demonstration from the professors would be awesome. And finally, I did a lot of Googling for this class, so a lot of learning for this class was done independently. And I think to really make this class worth taking again, because I learned a lot of this thing myself through Google. It would be to get some personalized feedback from the TA. A lot of my assignments, one, they weren't very clear on the requirements. So some assignments where I thought I wouldn't do as well, I actually did very well, and vice versa. On assignments that I thought I did very well in, I would get negative points on it. So some more clear instructions would be good, and also some feedback from TA, like saying like, hey, I see this is how you're trying to implement it, and it's working, but this is a better way to implement it. And those little critiques here and there would really make taking the class worth it instead of just going off of Google. But overall, it was a very great class. I enjoyed myself and I learned quite a bit. Thank you for watching.